Good morning, everybody. It's at the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. My name is Jennifer Morris. I'm with Madcap Software. Joining me today is Daniel Ferguson, certified FLAIR trainer and owner of Smart Output, which provides professional Madcap FLAIR consulting to clients across the globe. And if you want to learn more about Daniel and Smart Output, please visit smartoutput.com. Today, Daniel's going to be talking about the framework of a FLAIR project and how the different elements of a project fit together. So we're going to take a look at the differences between authoring, styling, building, publishing content, and also how all of these things tie into the very important concept of single source publishing. So welcome, Daniel. I'm so thrilled to have you today. We've got a lot to cover, so I want to just take care of a few housekeeping items. Hopefully you can all see Daniel's screen and you can hear me okay. If you can't, feel free to use the chat window or raise your hand in the questions panel there. We want to make sure we can assist as best we can, but from a technology side, since we can't see you, hopefully you can hear us and see us okay. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded, and so as soon as it's done, we will email it to everybody who signed up. So if you have to pop out early, not to worry, we'll send you that recording. As I mentioned, there is a questions panel in the GoToWebinar console, so please feel free to use that. If you have any questions that come up as Daniel's presenting, we're going to get to as many questions as we can at the end. Whatever we don't get to, we'll follow up with a question and answer document. So just keep jotting them down and we'll send that out along with the recording as soon as we're done. So again, welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And want to make sure, Daniel, you're not on mute. Can you? Looks like we have a little technical difficulty here, so bear with us, folks.
Hey, could you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Ooh, sorry about that. All right, let me turn my screen sharing back on.
Okay.
Or can you see my screen? There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a little note that said, "Hey, your audio has been disconnected."
Okay.
So I'm glad it reconnected.
Yeah, so no problem.
Okay, so you're done with the intro. I am so sorry about that.
No problem.
Well, hello everybody. What a grand entry to make into this webinar. My name is Daniel Ferguson. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm so happy to be here with you today and to be able to present this webinar. This is, I think, the 7th or 8th webinar that I've done here on the Madcap webinar series, and it's a great experience. And what makes it a great experience is the connections I get to make with people after the webinar is over. Connect with you. Either send me an email, let's connect on LinkedIn or something. I want to hear what you're doing. I want to hear what your experiences are. I want to hear where you're at in your FLAIR journey and see what I can do to help you. And I find, in life, it's not software that provides meaning, it's people and it's relationships. And I love working in FLAIR. And a big part of the reason why I love working in FLAIR is because of the FLAIR community. So I'd love to connect with you. We're going to talk about some cool things today. This is more of a beginner type webinar. A lot of the other ones I've done have been a little bit more advanced, but when Madcap approached me about doing this webinar, I actually went out to their YouTube page and I said, okay, what are the most viewed YouTube videos that they have on their YouTube page? And I saw topics like an overview of FLAIR, an introduction to FLAIR, Madcap FLAIR for the total newbie, Madcap FLAIR, where do I begin? Getting started in Madcap FLAIR. Like, these are the most viewed videos. These are what people are going to. And so I know, not only from looking at what people are viewing on their YouTube channel, but also from my own personal experience of being a FLAIR consultant and a trainer, that there's a lot of interest and demand and a lot of assistance that people need when they're just getting started in FLAIR. Now, if you're just getting started, my suspicion is that you're having an experience like all of us that got started in FLAIR have had, where you get FLAIR open and all of a sudden you start learning about all these different types of files and functionality, and different capabilities, things that you can do in Flare, new terminology. You're like, what's this? How does that fit in? And it can come at you so fast and so heavy that you're just left with confusion. And if you're in this spot right now, you're in the right place in this webinar, and you're also not alone. All of us who have gotten started in Flare have experienced this sort of initial wave, right, that just comes at you as you're trying to get started and you just can't figure out how it all fits together. It's a totally new experience. Maybe you're coming from a word processing environment or who knows what, and it's just hard to kind of wrangle it all. How do I put all of this together so that I can actually deliver something for my business? I've worked with so many people who are in this state. And for this webinar, I wanted to put together some of the key things that I teach people, that I help them with, to start to figure out how all of this does fit together. What is the framework? How does Flare work? What are these different types of files? And how do I know how they fit together and piece together so that I can actually deliver something? And so I'm going to teach you today and share with you what I share with people who work with me. Now, we're not going to be able to go through everything. We only have an hour. But what I want to do is get you started down the road of understanding. In my experience, when I work with people, the biggest challenge that we have is simply understanding how the pieces fit together. That's the single biggest challenge. When people can grasp conceptually how it all fits together, then it seems like everything else starts to fall in place. They can learn how to do CSS. They can learn how to do cool things in their topics. They can learn how to manipulate master pages. They can do all these great things, right, with their Flare output if they can grasp how it's all coming together. What piece is doing what? Where does it all come from? How does it fit? That's what we're going to do today. And I'm going to share with you some mindset techniques, like some ways of thinking as you're working in Flare to help keep your project organized and straight. We're going to talk about some of the key aspects of Flare, and you're at the end of this webinar have a much better handle on how to get started and where to go for your next steps and how Flare works. So you'll have that conceptual construct in your mind. So our goal today is to start you down the road from confused to empowered. We're not going to get all the way in 1 hour, but we can get started, and we can start to build that conceptual framework so that you have something to start working with. You have something to start building on. That's what we're going to do today. So our objectives today are to understand why Flare is designed the way it is. I get a lot of questions from people. Why is it this way? So I'm going to just briefly talk about why Flare is the way that it is. We're going to start to build an understanding of how its main pieces fit together and relate to one another. And there's going to be quite a bit of demonstration from key aspects of the Flare interface. We're not going to go into a deep level how-to. We're going to do a little bit of how-to, but this isn't a deep level how-to webinar as much of just a understanding Flare architecture webinar. There's all kinds of other webinars that go through how-to. In fact, I'm even going to reference some of them here in this webinar right here that you can go watch later to learn some deeper hints and tips and technical aspects of some of the files that we're going to be talking about. In this one, we're just going to be looking at how do they all piece together. So those are our objectives today. So first of all, why? Why is Flare built the way that it is? Why is it so confusing? Can be so confusing to new users? Well, the same architecture that makes Flare confusing is also what gives it its immense power, especially its single sourcing power, which is just incredible what you can do with single sourcing in Flare. And so all of these different pieces that you meet when you start working in Flare that can cause so much confusion, once you can get a grasp on them, provide incredible flexibility and power to you as an author. In my office here, just around the corner, there's a grocery store. And I was in there just the other day and went walking in there. Went over there to see if I could find something for lunch, and there's a little deli section, and they have a bunch of prepackaged sandwiches that were like made there that morning, and then they wrapped them in plastic wrap and so forth. And I could choose one of those and walk out with it. Well, right next to the grocery store is a Subway sandwich shop. And in Subway, I can walk in and I can tell them everything I want. What bread I want, how big I want it, if I want any meat on it and what kind, all the different vegetables, seasonings, dressings, all that sort of stuff. And it's all laid out there, and I can just tell them what I want them to put on the sandwich. Well, working in Flare is much more like a Subway experience than it is a prepackaged deli experience, where you get to pick what you want to do. And if you can get a hold on what all these different pieces do and how they all work together, what you're able to deliver and do with Flare is it's just unbelievably powerful and almost endless what you can create. So let's get started. Let's look at how Flare is structured. And I'm going to start by talking about what I refer to as the 3 T's: topics, TOCs, and targets. Each of these 3 T's are specific file types in Flare. And in a nutshell, if you don't have at least one topic, at least one TOC, and at least one target, you don't really have a viable Flare project, right? These are essential files in order for you to have a Flare project in almost all cases. There's some edge cases, like if we're producing data output or something like that, where maybe there's an exception. But for the vast majority of people who are building HTML5 output like TopNav or Tripane or PDF output, you have to have these 3 files, at least one of each. And most likely, especially in more mature projects, you have multiples of these files, especially topics. Topics, TOCs, and targets. Now, because these 3 T files are the fundamental files, the fundamental building blocks of a Flare project, pretty much everything else, and 90% of everything else that you find in Flare either goes into one of these or supports one of these. These are the pillar topics in a Flare, or the pillar file types in a Flare project: topics, TOCs, and targets. So what are they? Well, topics is really pretty straightforward. They just contain your content. And we're going to look at topics here in just a minute. And they're stored in your what's called your Content Explorer in Flare. And they're just there. And they're just organized alphabetically, just like you'd find in like a Windows Explorer window. And in Flare, Flare is what's referred to as a topic-based authoring tool. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. You don't author in Flare, or it's not optimized to be authored in the same way like you do in a word processor, right? You break up your pieces of information into smaller chunks that are called topics. And that's what a topic is a small piece of information. Some of them are as short as a paragraph. Some of them can be quite a bit longer. It doesn't really matter from a Flare standpoint how short or long your topics are, and we're going to look at some, like I said, here in just a minute. But just know that topics is where your content is, your headings, your paragraphs, your images, your lists, your tables, all that stuff that really creates business value, that's in your topics. But they're just thrown in, they're just in a Content Explorer with no organization except an alphabetical organization and some folder structure that you can create. Where we get to the point where we actually start putting order to our topics, where we create a hierarchy and a structure to them, is in the TOC. And again, that's a specific file type in Flare. We're going to look at that one too here in just a second. And basically in a TOC, you take some of your topics or all of your topics, whatever, a subset of them or all of them, whatever you need in your project, and you put them into a TOC file. And you can think of this just like it's named. You can think of it just like a table of contents. Imagine a table of contents, right, in a PDF guide, or imagine a navigation on a website where you've got a navigation like a TopNav in a Flare output. That is generated from a TOC file. So you're putting your topics into a structure and into a hierarchy in the TOC file. That's where the structure takes place and is created. And then finally, that TOC file gets assigned to a target. And a target is what compiles or builds the output that can then be shared, published, or used in some other way. It'll build, like in almost all cases, a PDF file or an HTML5 site. And that's what the target does. It takes that TOC and it has a lot of other settings in it. We're going to look at some of them today. Takes that TOC and you build the target, and it looks at the TOC that's assigned to it, says, okay, I need to go get these files in this structure, in this order, go back, get the topics that are linked to those TOC entries and build that. And that's what we'll be able to use for, to deliver to somebody to actually use. Topics, TOCs, and targets. Those are the fundamental foundation of your Flare project. A lot of other stuff and a lot of other necessary stuff like style sheets that we need to get into. But these are these are the ones that if you don't have these, you don't have a Flare project. You really don't. It doesn't. There's nothing you can do really with the Flare project if you're missing one of these. And so everything else in Flare, like I said, feeds into these. So that's the first sort of mental construct that you can have in your mind of understanding how Flare pieces together and how it works. Okay, so we're going to switch over now and do a little bit of demo. I'm going to open up Flare, and what I'm going to show you in the demo you can do, because we're going to start with just a basic Flare template. I don't even have it created yet. So I'm going to show you how to create a brand new project. We're going to pick this template. The template I have chosen to use for this demo is the Top Navigation and PDF Basic 2 template. There are some advanced templates. In this webinar, we're not at the advanced state yet. We're at basic, and that's just fine. So we're going to use a basic template. I'm going to show you in Flare the relationship between topics, TOCs, and targets, and then we're actually just going to build a target and view the output so you can see how this all works together. So give me just a second here. Let me switch over to Flare. I think I have it open. Yep, I do. Okay, so here I've got Flare open. So I'm going to go create a new project. So I'm going to go File, New Project. And I'm going to get the new project wizard that's going to come up. And in this wizard, I go ahead and give my name, choose a project name, and select the folder that I want this project to live in on my hard drive, and click Next. And here in the Next window, I'll be able to select that template that I was just talking to you about. So the template we're going to use is this Top Navigation and PDF Basic 2 template, and it's here in the Online and Print folder. I'm going to go through this probably a little fast so that we can get through more content here during the webinar. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, this will be recorded and sent out to you. So if you want to follow along in these steps later, you'll have the recording and you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to click Next, and I've got my template, and the next screen asks me, well, here are your available targets. Which one do you want to be the primary target? And I'll talk about what primary target means, but just know at this point, you're not locked into anything, right? If you select a primary target here, let's say we leave it HTML5 top nav, that doesn't mean you can't change it later. You can always change it. So anything that you choose in this initial project setup is changeable. There's nothing that locks you in. Even though we've selected a template, all it really does is pre-populate our Flare project with some certain key files. But we can change those files in whatever way we want to change them. And so it's not like if you start with a particular template that you're stuck and you can't ever use anything else that's in another template. The world is still available to you. A template in this context is simply a starting point. So everything is changeable. I'm going to leave this at HTML5 top navigation. Most of the people that I work with are delivering HTML5 output, and so that's going to be our primary focus today. We will touch a little bit on PDF output too, depending on how much time we've got. So I'll go ahead and click Finish, and it creates a new project for me. And I'm going to open up my Content Explorer. Now you see I clicked this little button down here, this little, what do you call this? This tab, this accordion tab down here in the bottom left, where we're going to be working today in the Content Explorer and Project Organizer. And whenever you work in Flare, those are the two primary places where you'll be working. And what they do is open up a window here on the left pane. And this is my Content Explorer, and this is where all my topics are. Now in this template, I've got 6 folders here in my Content Explorer, and 5 of them, the first 5, all contain topics. Topics in Flare have a .htm extension. And so here are my topic files in this particular Flare project. I've got, what, about 20 of them or so. Now there's also this resources folder, which contains some other things that we're going to be coming back to, but we're not going to touch on those right now. Now you can order your Content Explorer however you want. You can create as many folders as you want. If you're going to be working in a project with lots and lots of topics, it's a good idea to pay attention to this folder structure so that it makes it a little bit easier for you to get to the files that you want to get to. But there's no restriction on how to set this up. You can set it up however you want to set it up. If you want to create a new topic, let's say you're ready to create a new topic in your project, my preferred way to do it is to right-click on the folder where I want the new topic to live, right-click it and come down and select New Topic. And you'll get the new topic dialog box, and you can go ahead and create the new topic. And I'm just going to click Add, and now I've got a new topic that I just put in here. It's called contacts.htm, and I can go author my content as much as I want. Again, we're not focusing on authoring in this webinar, so I'm not going to go through that at all. There are lots of other webinars that you can go watch and other help content on the Flare help that focuses on authoring content. So I've got all my topics here. So let's go look at a TOC. Well, where I find my TOCs is in the project organizer. So I'm going to flip over here to the project organizer, and here I've got my TOCs folder. And you see I've got 2 TOCs in this project. You can have as many TOCs as you want in a project. I'm going to open up the online output TOC, and you see this one is labeled as master. I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute. And here, if I expand these folders, I'll click the expand all, you start to see an order and a structure. And all of these TOC entries, as what they are called, link to topics that are in my Content Explorer. And I can actually right-click one of these, let's say Procedure 2, I'll right-click it and come down and I can select Locate in Explorer. And it'll highlight that topic in the Content Explorer for me, so I can see where that particular TOC entry is linked to in my Content Explorer, so I can know what topic it is. You can do the other way around too. You can right-click a Content Explorer entry and you can select Locate in TOC. And if that topic is used in more than one TOC like this one is, it'll ask you which TOC you want to view. I'll just go ahead and select Online Output here, and it'll take me right to where that TOC entry is. Now I added this particular topic. Let's say that I wanted to add this to my TOC so that it gets built and it's in my navigation and people can use it and see it. All I need to do is just drag it over. Let's say I want to put it down here in company information. And in fact, here I'm going to move it. I'll move it after FAQs just so I can show you how to position them. Let's say I want it to be a subset of FAQs. I can use these blue arrows. If I don't get it just where I want it on the click and drag, I can use these blue arrows to position that TOC entry where I want it. And so now I've got my new contact topic and it's a subset of FAQs. I may not want it there ultimately, maybe I'll move it back, but I can position my TOC entries using these blue arrows. So you see now how topics flow into the TOC. So these TOC entries all map back to a topic in your project. So now let's look at the target, the third of the 3 T's. I'm going to flip back to the project organizer, and I'm going to open up my targets folder. And I'm going to open up the HTML5 top navigation target. Again, what a target does is it generates or builds usable output. Up until this point, everything we've been working with is Flare source files. Nobody can use those but you, the author. If we want to get to the point where we're actually delivering something that people can use, then the target is the bridge between those two. So I'm going to come up here to the General tab. And in my target file, in every target file, you have a master TOC entry here. And this is what links your TOC to your target. Now you see in this case, it says default. Use the default TOC. If you leave this at default, it's going to build whatever TOC is designated as the master TOC. So in this case, if I just build this target, this is the TOC it's going to use. If I switch the user to the user guide master TOC as the master, I'm going to say make this master TOC. Well, now this target by default is going to build this TOC. I personally don't like leaving the master TOC at default. I like to set it in the target itself. So I'm going to hit the drop down and I'm going to say always build on the online output TOC for this target. So you can start to see as you look at this what single sourcing options start to become available from a topic level. We have 2 TOCs. And if I open up the user guide TOC, many of the same topics are reused in this TOC as what are in the online output TOC, but they all map back to the exact same topics in my Content Explorer. So one of Flare's single sourcing capabilities is topic reuse in multiple TOCs. You can even use the same topic multiple times in a single TOC if needed, if necessary. There's lots of other single sourcing capabilities, but that's one of them that becomes apparent as we start to look at the relationship between topics, TOCs, and targets. Every target has only one TOC assigned to it, but a single TOC can be assigned to multiple targets. So if I wanted to, I could go create another HTML5 target that also built the online output TOC. But I can't put 2 TOCs in a single target. So now I have this target here. You see there's a bunch of other settings. We're going to talk about some of the key ones as this webinar progresses. And I'm just going to go ahead and build it. So I'm going to click Build, and my build window opens up here down at the bottom, and it starts to generate usable output. It's building an actual HTML5 top navigation site for me. And I can watch the build progress. I can see what it's doing over here. And when I see 2 solid dark green bars, then I know that the build is complete. And at that point, I can click it and I can come over here to view output. Because this is an HTML5 target, it gives me my HTML5 options on how I want to view this, and I simply select the browser that I want to use. Mine opened up here on the other screen, so let me bring it over. And here we go. So it just built this for me. And this is now an HTML site that I can put on a web server, or I could even zip it up and send it to somebody. This is usable output generated from my Flare project. And it's the target file that got me from my Flare source to this HTML site. So the target file is absolutely key here in Flare. But you also see I wouldn't have gotten anything without a TOC or without any topics. Topics, TOCs, and targets, the 3 pillars of Flare. All right, let me drag this back over so that we can see the Flare screen again. Okay, so there we go. So we talked about topics, TOCs, targets. We looked at how they relate to each other here in the Flare interface. You can open up Flare and you can start working with this. If you pick a template like we picked, you can start actually seeing your content. Right now, of course, there's things we want to change in the template. You want to put your logo in there and make it, your look and feel. And we're going to talk about that here in the next half an hour. But this is where you get started, is by putting your content in your topics and adding them to a TOC and putting the TOC in a target. At that point, you've got a Flare project that works, and the rest is just tweaks. Sometimes some big tweaks that we're going to get into, but it's just tweaking how those 3 file types work. All right, let me get back into my slides here, if I can figure out how to do that. Give me just a second here, and then, okay, so we just walked through this demo. So I want to share with you, now that you've seen a little bit of Flare, what I call the Flare mindset, a way of thinking when you start working in Flare. Most of the people that I work with who are at the beginning stages, just getting started into Flare, have come from a word processing type background. Not all, but most. And if that's you, then what we want to do is take the typical word processing type authoring procedure and environment and start to deconstruct it. Start to break it up into individual lanes or paths as you're working in Flare. I've listed here authoring, styling, building, and publishing. If we're working in a tool like Microsoft Word or some other word processor, these tend to all get mushed together. If somebody's a more advanced Word user, they will separate authoring and styling, right? They'll separate their content from how they want their content to look and actually create styles that they apply to the content, but the vast majority of people don't. If they want something to be a heading, they press enter twice, type in the heading text, and go up and make it bold in 36 points or something like that, where they're mixing together styling and authoring. And then building, like we just did, in a word processing environment, they don't even have that it doesn't even exist, that concept. And then publishing is nothing more than printing out your document or emailing it to somebody. And so it all tends to kind of mesh together. And for word processors, that's great. That's what they're supposed to do. But we're moving into a more robust type authoring environment where we have single sourcing and we have additional capabilities and more power. And with that power comes responsibility, that we need to really make sure that we're doing things correctly in order to get the cleanest, most effective, most powerful Flare project architecture in the end. And what that means is that we need to think about these processes, authoring, styling, building, and publishing, as separate processes. Of course, they relate to each other. Everything relates to each other. But as you're working in Flare, think of them separately. So let's just take a quick look at each of these. When you're authoring in Flare, of course, the purpose is simply to create and structure your content. That's all you're doing in authoring, is you're creating your content. If you're working in a topic and your content doesn't look right, in Flare, it is not a best practice to go up in the selector for your various, like paragraph or character attributes and start changing the font or start setting the size or applying bold or applying italic. That's what's called inline formatting. And that really, really adds a lot of, it takes a lot of the flexibility and power away from what Flare has to offer. So when you're authoring, your focus is content, not necessarily how the content looks. Now, of course, we're interested in how it looks. But when we start to move into the realm of how something looks, how it's presented, we're styling. We're no longer authoring, we're styling. And you want to decouple those in your brain as you're working in Flare. So just think, when I'm focused on what it looks like, I'm in the styling lane, right? And the style and the authoring, of course, they're going to relate, but I don't want to mix up the styles in my actual authoring and my topics. I want them in a style sheet, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. So you create and structure your content in your authoring lane, and when you're working in authoring, you're going to be working in file types like topics, snippets. Snippets are like reusable content that you can use in multiple topics. You'll be working with images. You'll be structuring, of course, your topics in your TOC, that sort of thing. Those fall into the authoring lane, where you're creating your content and putting in a TOC structure. When you're styling, you're deciding what you want your content to look like. Two different things. Authoring content and deciding what you want it to look like in Flare are two different things. And so when we get to styling and deciding what we want it to look like, we'll be working in things like style sheets, table styles, a skin file, if you're in HTML5 output, these types of files that have to do with presentation, with how things look, that don't have to do necessarily with what we're presenting. Now, like I said, of course these relate, and we're going to look at that here in just a second, how these two things relate. But anytime you're dealing with something that has to do with how your stuff looks, you want to be working in a style sheet and getting that into a style sheet, not just building local styles in your topics. Okay, then we build, which you just saw, right? You've got your topics in place, your TOC in place, your target in place, and then you need to build. That's a separate task in Flare to take your content and build it into usable output. And when you're building, you saw you work in targets. We're also going to look at master pages and page layouts. It's a little bit of a stretch maybe to put these two file types in the build lane here. They kind of cross multiples, but we'll get into them and you'll see what I mean by what you can do with a master page and a page layout. But building is a separate thing. It's a separate task in Flare. It's a separate lane where you're constructing your output. Now, we just built output in the example that I just showed you, and you saw the site that was generated. I put it up here on the screen. Maybe you're following along and even built your own. Maybe you have your own project right now and you're building. When you build, all it does is take that generated content and puts it somewhere on your hard drive. It doesn't go anywhere but your hard drive. And that's so you can look at it, you can view it, you can test it, you can see if things are working, if you like the presentation, if you need to adjust some things. So that's all it is, it just stays there. Now there's nothing stopping you from taking that generated output and say it's a PDF file, emailing it to somebody, or an HTML site, FTPing it, right, to your web server. You can do that with just built output. But at that point, you're moving into publishing. And publishing is where we take our output and we put it somewhere where people can use it, where it's available to our users. And in publishing, we're using, if you do it in Flare, you're going to use, again, your target file and something called a destination file. And a destination file is simply a pointer that you put in the target, you assign to a target, and it's a pointer to some location where you want your output to be copied to. So building and publishing are two separate tasks in Flare. And anytime you publish from Flare, it runs a build for you, but you do not have to publish when you build. So breaking this down, deconstructing that as you become a Flare author and as you really start to work in Flare, it's really important to pay attention to these different lanes and to know which one you're working in, and to really focus on not mixing them together, especially the authoring and the styling. Now I'm going to show you how authoring and styling do mix together correctly. In fact, I think that's the next thing we're going to look at. Yeah, we're going to look at style sheets. So the style sheets determine the look of your content. Again, the topics just have the content. Now we're going to look at style sheets, and the style sheets determine how you want your content to look. Everything that affects how your content looks should be in the style sheet. Everything. And the style sheets are found in your Content Explorer Resources Style Sheets folder. So we're going to flip over to Flare and do another demo. We're going to open up a topic and a style sheet, and the style sheet editor side by side in Flare, so that I can show you how they relate to one another. We're going to edit a style in the style sheet, and you can see how that's going to apply to the topics, and you'll start to understand as you look at this why we use style sheets rather than inline styles. We're going to create and apply a separate style class. So we'll create a class in the style sheet and then apply it in a topic. And we're also going to look at table styles, because table styles have their own their own file type in Flare if we're working in tables. So let's bring Flare back up here, and let me drag it over onto the screen. I'm going to close some windows here so we have some more space to work in. Let me close these TOCs, and I'm just going to open a topic. We'll just open Getting Started. It doesn't matter which one we choose. And I'm also going to come down here to my Resources Style Sheets folder, and I'm going to open my styles.css file. Just double click it and open it. And what this does is it opens the Flare CSS editor, which is an amazingly powerful CSS editor. As you get more advanced, you may start working just directly in CSS code. That's fine, nothing wrong with that. But if you're just starting, this CSS editor is wonderful. So I'm going to open these up side by side. So I'm going to take my styles tab here, and I'm actually just going to drag it out. And I am going to drag it down. Oops, let me grab it. I'm going to drag it down here and put it side by side with my topics so that I can see my style sheet editor and my topics side by side here. Let me see if I can create a little bit more room. There we go. Okay, now when you're working in a topic, you see over here on the left these what are called structure bars. If you don't see them, I recommend you go turn them on by clicking this little button down here, toggle show blocks. The reason why you want to pay attention to these is because these map to styles in your style sheet. So for example, we have an HTML block here. Well, in our HTML block, we're going to come over here to our style sheet and we're going to see an HTML style. Same thing with body. I can come up and I find my body style. Same thing with H1 and with paragraph. I can go find the H1 right here, and I can go down here and I can also find my paragraph tag right there, my paragraph style. Now, these styles inherit. So what that means is if I set a particular, some styles here to the body, then it's going to apply to the H1 and to the paragraph, and anything else that I put in this topic. Everything in the topic is going to be in the body and in the HTML tag. And so you want to be careful with what styles you do put in your body. It's appropriate to use it, and in fact, we're going to go look. We'll go look right now. We're going to click the body tag here, and let me scoot this over so we get a little bit more room. And here in the style sheet editor, you see a bunch of style groupings, things that we can go start to adjust. Now let me show you some different views that you can get in from your style sheet editor. The first is you can choose whether you want to show an alphabetical list of styles available to you or the group view. I'm going to say we stick with the group view for now, especially if you're new to CSS, because this, Madcap provided a fairly intuitive grouping on going through and finding styles that we may want to adjust. You can also choose what you want to see from this little drop down here. Do you want to look at all properties that are available to you? Do you want to just see ones that are relevant? Or do you want to see ones that are just set, either from an imported style sheet or right in this style sheet? I'm going to switch this view right now to the ones that are set in this or imported, and I can see my list just got a lot smaller, and I can actually go see what styles are applied to my body style, my body tag. I've got a font color, a font family, a default font size, and a line height. And so everything in my topic is going to inherit these styles because everything will be within the body tag. If I go put a new paragraph in, you see it also gets included here in the body tag. So what if I want to override these styles? Like this has a default font size of 12 point, but this H1 is clearly bigger than 12 points. Well, I can come down here now, let's go to my H1 style, and I can see, in my H1 style, I don't use the 12 point font size, I use 1.5 ems in this particular template. By default, it uses the H1 font size is 1.5 ems. So I can override styles in these lower tags that are set in I guess I'll call them higher ones. You can override them. So you probably won't set a whole lot of styles in body. You'll end up setting more of your styles in these lower level tags. So if I wanted to change what my H1s look like, I could come in here and change it. Maybe I don't want them to be normal. Maybe I want them to be bold. I can select that here in my style sheet and save it. And now all my heading ones are bold, not for this topic, just this topic, but for every single topic that uses an H1. So you see, I have determined if I wanted my heading ones to be bold, I didn't go up here and click the bold button. I came to my style sheet and specified that I wanted my heading ones to be bold. That's the distinction between authoring and styling. And if you do too much of this, coming up over to here, you lose the power that the style sheet has to offer, especially when you get into hundreds or even thousands of topics in your project. So you really want to pay attention to keeping those separate. So we just created a different style property for our heading 1. Let's come down now here to our paragraph. And I'm going to create a new paragraph class. So first of all, I can see all the properties that are applied to my paragraph here. I can see in this particular style sheet, I've got an 8 pixel margin bottom and an 8 pixel margin top. These two will overlap each other. The margins are not additive. So there's 8 pixels between them, as you can see here. If I wanted more space between them, I could adjust that. Let's say I wanted it to be 15 pixels, just so it's noticeable. I could set a 15 pixel margin, whoops, I meant to do margin bottom, but I'll change this one too, 15 pixel margin bottom. And then when I save it, you see I get more spacing between my paragraphs. So I'm not just pushing enter twice, right, to get a space between my paragraphs. I can actually come in and I create my different, my spacing. But let's say I want a different type of paragraph, one that's a note, is very, very common. So in this case, I'm going to create a new class. And here's how you do that. You select the paragraph and you come up here to add selector. So I'm going to click add selector and you give it a class name. What class of paragraph do you want to create? Well, I want to create a note. So I'm going to give a class name of note and press OK. And now you see underneath my paragraph here, I've got a bunch of different classes, but the one I just created is right here. So now I have a new class that I can apply. So I'm going to go start creating some properties for it. Let me scoot this back over here. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my style sheet viewer here to show assorted relevant properties. Show me the properties that are relevant to a paragraph. And let's say for my notes, let me collapse these so we can see a little bit better. For my notes, let's say that I want, maybe I want to put a border around it. Okay, so I can come in here and say, I want a border around my notes here. And I'm going to click this and say, okay, let's give it a 1 pixel solid maroon type border around any one of my notes. And I see down here in my viewer here that I can see a sample of what this is going to look like. And maybe you want a border, or maybe you want a background color, or you can do all kinds of things on what you want to do here. And these styles are not Flare specific. They're part of the CSS specification. And so you can do all kinds of Google searches. If you want to know how to put a border around something, go out to Google and type CSS border, and you'll find the property that you need to use, and it'll show up here in Flare so that you can use it. Now let's say that I want to add a little spacing between my words and the actual border. I can come in here to box and I can add some padding, is what it's called. Let's say I want about 10 pixels of padding, and I'm going to get some space now between my words and the actual border. Now with this class in place, I can now go apply this class to my content. Let's say my new paragraph here is a note. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to open up my style window. It's in the Home tab, Style window. And over here on the right, I'm going to see what styles are available to me for my new paragraph. And sure enough, here I see my p.note. So I'm going to apply that class, and all of a sudden, my new paragraph gets the note class that I just created. And I can put a note here. Let's say this one is a note. I can go apply the note class to this one as well. Now, when somebody says, hey, why do our note classes have a maroon border? We actually want them to have a blue border. Well, you come in and you say, okay, I can do that. Let me just switch this from maroon to blue. There you go, boss, you're now happy. We now have a blue border around all of our notes. And you could have 1,000 notes, and the style sheet allows you to change all of them with just a couple of clicks. That's why you want to keep your styles. One of the reasons why you want to keep your styles and your authoring separate is to keep that power. Okay, so those are style sheets. Oh, I said I wanted to show you a table style as well. So I'm going to go right-click style sheets, and I'm going to go new table style. We're not going to dive into the table style. I simply want to point out that there is a whole separate editor just for tables, just to style tables. And that's how you would create a table style. And then you can apply the table style to specific tables so that your tables look just like you want them to look. So just know that that is there. Okay, I'm talking too much here. I need to speed up a little bit. Okay, so let's get back into this. We're now going to break down a little bit how the HTML top nav all comes together. right? We want to start piecing together, how does this actually work? When I push build, where does all this stuff come from? Well, we've talked about topics, we've talked about TOCs. I now want to talk a little bit about skin files and dive into a master page, because this is really helps you envision how this all comes together in the end. So first, let's mention skin files. Skin files define the look and feel for your final output. They work in conjunction with a style sheet, but the style sheet applies primarily to your content, whereas a skin file will apply to things like your banner up at the top, or the way you want your side navigation to look, those types of things. That's what you use skin files for. And there's a number of, so there's main skin files like a top nav skin, and then there's component skin files, what Flare calls component skin files. And the most common of those component skin files are the favicon, like if you want a little image, to show up in your browser tab, and the menu component skin to style how you want your side menu to look. So let's look at this real quick, and then we're going to get to master pages. So coming back over here to Flare, our skins are found in our project organizer skins folder right here. I'm going to open up the HTML5 top navigation skin, and you'll see what I get here is in my skin editor, and I'm not sure if you guys can, let me close some windows out here. There we go. So we can see a bigger view of it. You see I have over here a bunch of different styles, different aspects of the skin that I can adjust. Let's say I want a different background color. I don't want this black. My preferred way to do it is to click highlight, click the thing that I want to style, and then it shows me where to go over here in the editor. And let's say I want a background color that's this green, for example. And so you can see it just turned this background color to a green. And so this is where I'd come to set these types of styles, and I can adjust the styles for my drop-down menus and all sorts of things, as you can see here in my skin editor. Now, I also mentioned we have component skins, and I want to switch back to the target really quick to show you how skins map into the target. So I'm going to go back into my HTML5 top navigation, and I see there's a skin tab here. And the skin tab allows me to choose what skin I want to use, and then what component skins I want to use. You see all these component skins if you're using a top navigation skin. If you're using a tri-pane skin, you won't see all of these. So I'm going to look at this side menu component skin, which is this menu one. I'm going to look at the side menu component skin. You see I have the option now to style what my side menu ends up looking like. I'm going to pull the built output back over here, and here is my side menu. And here is the skin file that styles it. And I assign this side menu skin file right here in my target. Like I mentioned before, targets is where everything comes together. So that's what skin files do. Now I want to jump over back to my presentation, and I want to spend a little bit of time diving into master pages. Master pages are very powerful and a key part of your HTML5 output, and I want to map for you how master pages, what they do and how they all come together. The screenshot on the left is an actual screenshot of the master page in the template that we created earlier. If you were to go into your Content Explorer Resources master pages and open up the master page that's in there, you'd see what's on the left side of my slide right here. And then on the right, you see the generated output. So I'm going to show you, map this from the master page. What the master page is like a template file for your online output. It specifies what you want to show up in each of your topics that you build. And what I've got in my master page here is 4 proxies. A proxy is a placeholder where it says, hey, I want this particular thing to be here when I generate the output, but I don't know exactly what needs to go there until the output is generated. And so you use in your master page, your HTML5 template, so to speak, you use these placeholders called proxies. And then when you generate the output, the proxies are converted into usable components on your actual output. So if we look at this first one, this topic toolbar proxy, which I just highlighted in orange, it shows up over here where you've got your topic toolbar buttons. If you look at the menu proxy, I just highlighted in green, it shows up here in the menu. If you look at your breadcrumbs proxy, you see they show up there as your breadcrumbs. And of course, your topic body proxy is where all of your topic content will show up. And so the master page is specifying what you want to show up when you build your project, what you want every topic page to look like. And you apply a master page, just like a skin, you apply a master page in a target file. The target file is where everything comes together. And if you're paying attention to your bars over here, you see there's 3 what are called divs. And divs are just a tag in HTML that allow you to apply certain styles, that allow you, they give you a hook, right, to create additional CSS. That's something that may be a bit more advanced as you get into CSS. But always a good idea to pay attention to what's going on over here in your structure bars. So that is how the master page maps to the file that actually gets generated. Now let's look at the whole output, like the whole thing. Where does all this stuff come from? This is a screenshot of an HTML output from the project that we just created, our template. And I've left labels on here of where the things in the actual page come from the master page, right? The breadcrumbs proxy was specified in the master page. The topic toolbar proxy was specified in the master page. The topic body proxy from the master page. The menu proxy from the master page. But what about the rest of it? Where does this all come from? So this top banner is from the skin file. The next piece down, like I just mentioned, is from the master page. What about all these navigation elements? Where does this top nav come from? Where does it know how to grab the breadcrumbs proxy? What about the navigation, the menu over on the right? Well, all of those come from your TOC file. So your TOC is what sets your structure. And so when you build, Flare looks at your TOC, and that's how it knows how to generate your navigation and your breadcrumbs. That all comes from the TOC file. And then your topic file shows up in the topic body proxy. And so for every topic where this master page gets applied, this is where the content is going to go, is in the topic body proxy. So if we go back, and we will get to questions here in just a second, and look at the Flare project again, this is where it all comes together. So you specify your TOC, which we've talked about. You specify your style sheet, which we've talked about. We specify your skin files. And down here in advanced is where you can specify what master page you want to use for this particular build, or for this particular target. And when you build it, Flare's going to grab all that stuff together, and then it's going to generate the output for you, and then you'll have usable output. So I hope that this was provided some help for you if you're at just the beginning stage. I realize I covered a lot of information here and went through some of it kind of quickly. Please send me questions. If you have more questions, I'm happy to help you out with them, to answer them, even get on the phone with you if you'd like to walk through them, because I really want to help you be successful. And part of that beginning stage of being successful is simply seeing how all of this stuff fits together. So let me click back over now to the presentation. I think there's a couple more slides here, Jennifer, that we're going to have you cover. Let me pull those up.
So thank you so much. That was so helpful. I always learn so much. Before we get to some great questions that have come in, really quick, just for 30 seconds, as a reminder for everybody, if you want to take some of these skills to the next level, I would encourage you to sign up for one of these 2 training classes. As an attendee, you get $100 off your registration. So contact your sales rep or email us at sales@madcapsoftware.com if you have any questions about the courses, registering, or the discounts. We'd be happy to help you out there. We have 2 coming up. So one on CSS to take those skills to the next level, and a focus class on single sourcing skills in Flare and how to take those to the next level as well. And then lastly, as a reminder, if you haven't registered for our learning conferences yet for MadWorld, I would encourage you all to do so. Daniel's going to be presenting sessions there. He'll be doing workshops as well. It's an amazing opportunity to come and learn. You're going to be, you'll be able to pick and choose learning sessions that pertain to your skill set, and you'll be able to apply those things to your work the minute you return. Plus, we have our hospitality lounge staffed with members of support and R&D to help with any project-specific questions you have. Many folks that have come to MadWorld and maybe some of you on here have come and you'll agree. Some people think that that hospitality lounge is worth the price of admission alone. So it's a wonderful chance to get project specific and that over the shoulder help. So please check it out. Encourage you to come. There's a registration discount through April 30th. And now we have just a couple minutes. If some of you want to hang on, I know we're a little bit over, but I do want to get to just a couple questions. And just as a reminder, we will be sending this presentation and the question and answers to everybody. So if you have to leave, no problem. We'll get it over to you. I just a couple really good questions here. This is a good one. What if I want to add, and this was pertaining to when you had the style sheet editor open in Flare. Mm-hmm. What if I want to add a different property that isn't in the list? The add property isn't always visible. I love that question.
So yeah, that is a good question. So if you're in your style sheet editor, let me open it up real quick, and it's not in the list. So you know there's a CSS style out there and you're looking through the list and it simply isn't available. And let me close this out. So, so you're looking over in here. Let me show all of them real quick. And you're looking through this list and it's just not there. How do you add it, right? Well, what you can do is you can actually open up your style sheet in the internal text editor. And I'm going to do that right now. And here I see my style sheet. So this is the GUI view. This is the internal text editor view. And here I can go add whatever styles I want. So if I want to add a style to my body, I can come in here and I can simply type it in and I can add it. I'm going to add one that is, there, but just as an example, I can add whatever I want. So I can put whatever styles I want if I'm okay working in the code. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think too, referring to sometimes when you're working in the style sheet editor, I think there's a way to just add it in there from the UI. And sometimes that's, yeah, and I think it has to do with what you're looking at in terms of what we're showing, whether it's relevant properties or set properties, we get that choice.
Yeah, it sure does. And yes, there is a way. I can't remember exactly what view you need to be in. Oh, here it is, like right here. I can just add a property. Yeah, so if my notes, if I want a background color on my notes, I can just type it in there, press enter, and then that adds it for me, and I can go select the background color that I want.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a better option, unless you're okay working in code. Then use that add property box up there for sure.
Yeah, and I think it shows up when you have that view to show, versus all of the properties versus just what's set. If you're I think it's when you're looking at just what's set, you get that choice to add it.
I think you're right. Thank you, Jennifer, for that clarification. Yep.
I hope that answers the question to the viewer who asked. Okay, here, this may take a little bit more time, and if we need to take this off in an explanation, we can. But the question is, can you show how to include a little image in your note, like a small light bulb or something small?
Sure. Yeah, and that does probably take a little bit more time, but let me show you what styles you would use to add an image to your note. What you would want to go to, and I have my note class up here, and let me view more of the styles. I'm going to show all properties. What you're going to be looking at is this background image property here, where you say you have a little light bulb, and you put the little light bulb image somewhere here in your project, maybe in your images folder, and then you would come select that light bulb here in your style sheet. You actually navigate to that image and you would select it. And then you would need to set some other settings in order to support that. For example, you would need to set background repeat to no repeat. You would need to set the background size, most likely, some positioning, how you want it to be positioned. You would probably also need to set some margin on your actual content to move it to the right a little bit so that the little image, the light bulb or whatever, shows up there. There's all kinds of help on how to do this. Just out on the internet. If you go just Google CSS background image, you'll find all kinds of things to help you out on how to set background images. Like little light bulbs and so forth for notes. And I know that there's been other webinars that you can go search in the webinar library that cover this exact thing on how to create these cool note styles and things. Yeah.
And I think we have blog posts too we can always share.
Yep. But those are the properties you would use, are your background image properties and background repeat and background positioning, those types of properties.
Yeah, good question. Another one I think we could tackle quickly. Can I use a side menu to create a TOC for the section headings in the currently active topic as opposed to a TOC for the entire help system?
You do have some options in your side menu proxy. Let me open that up. It's in the master page, master pages. Let me open up the master page here. And here is the menu proxy, right, that's generating that side menu. And if I right click this, I can come down here to edit menu proxy, and I have some options here on what I want to show up in that particular menu proxy. I can choose if I want to use a different TOC. I've never seen this done before, but you could select that. And you have some different options. Do you want to include parents, siblings, children, those sorts of things, and how deep you want it to go. Now, what I will say is using the menu proxy, it looks at your TOC. So it finds parents, siblings, children in the TOC. It doesn't look within the topic, right? And so it's not going to go through and find like all your heading twos within the topic itself. So that's not a capability that the menu proxy provides right now, but you do have some flexibility with what you want to show in the menu proxy.
Good. Thank you. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap. I'm going to leave this open for just a second, the question panel, if anybody wants to jot down some last minute ones. We do have some other questions that we just won't have time to answer live, but we will be sending over a question and answer document with all of your questions and your answers. So stay tuned for that. Daniel, if you want to put your closing slide up there, just so everybody can get your information one last time.
Sure, let's see, here it is.
Yeah, so take a look at that. Again, feel free to jot down any last minute questions. We'll be sending it out to everybody. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time. This was most helpful. Want to thank everybody for joining me today, and we will have additional webinars coming up. Check back to the live webinars page. We have more scheduled. And also refer to the webinar library. If you're interested in more on CSS or other webinars that Daniel has done, you can find them all there. Want to wish you a wonderful rest of the week. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you on the next presentation. So thanks again, Daniel, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.